Have you ever felt lost, like you were walking without direction even though you were doing everything right? Have you ever had that feeling that no matter how hard you try, something is missing? A voice, a light, a guidance. Maybe you're exactly at that point right now, tired of making decisions in the dark, of fighting doubt, anxiety, and that silence that screams when you need an answer the most. But what if today was different? What if, right now, you were about to hear wisdom that could completely transform the way you see your life, your problems, and your choices? What you will hear in this video is not just another opinion, it's a direction, a clear word, a message straight from heaven to you. And in the end, you will never be the same. Because when God speaks, something changes inside, and that change is real. So if you are tired of living by the logic of fear, doubt, and emptiness, stay here. God has something specific for you. Something that will renew your faith, rekindle your hope, and strengthen your spirit. And if you feel like this message is already speaking to you, prove your commitment right now. Leave us a comment. I need to hear the voice of God. We will leave a like on your comment as a sign that we are praying with you. And also tell me where you are watching from. We want to see how far this message of hope and wisdom is reaching. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any words that can change your life. Now take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear may be exactly what your heart has been asking for a long time. What prevents us from accessing this wisdom more often is not a lack of opportunity. Often, it is pride disguised as self-sufficiency. Yes, that silent feeling that says, I can do it, I already know, I can manage. It is subtle, but dangerous, because little by little, without realizing it, we replace dependence on God with blind trust in our own abilities. It's amazing how pride can disguise itself as competence. After all, anyone looking from the outside sees someone strong, determined, and determined. But inside, that same heart carries an enormous fear of admitting that it doesn't know what it's doing. Because for many, asking for help is still a sign of weakness. Confessing that you are lost still feels like defeat. But God does not operate according to the logic of appearances. He does not respond to disguise. He responds to the truth. And the truth is that only by recognizing our limitations can we open ourselves to the wisdom that transforms. God's wisdom does not enter closed hearts, nor does it reveal itself to those who think they already know everything. It manifests itself in humility, in the sincere recognition, Lord, I need you. Perhaps that is why the Bible is so clear when it states, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. This phrase is not just a warning, it is a key, a revelation of the path. Because pride raises barriers that not even God can overcome without our consent. He can do anything, but he chooses to act where there is surrender. And you know what's even more curious? Sometimes we are so determined to prove our strength that we resist even God's voice. Yes, the very wisdom we pray for, we reject when it arrives unexpectedly. Because in practice, many of us want God to confirm our wills, not for him to confront them. Think about how many times you have asked for guidance, but deep down, you had already decided what you wanted to hear. How many times have you sought advice, but only considered it valid if it agreed with your desires? This is also pride. When we place ourselves at the center of truth and expect even God to adapt to our plans. But there is something liberating in admitting, I don't know. Because it is in that place of vulnerability that wisdom begins to flow. Divine wisdom is not the fruit of hoarding, it is the fruit of surrender. When you stand with an open heart, without masks, without defenses, something begins to change. God speaks, and you truly listen. And listening to God is not just a nice spiritual experience, it is a practical necessity. Because every day we make decisions that shape our future. Every day we face invisible crossroads, and if we are not sensitive to the right voice, We risk wasting energy on paths that lead nowhere. Many carry deep frustrations today because they made decisions for themselves yesterday, because they were more concerned with appearing strong than being guided. But there is still time. There is always time when it comes to God. Pride may have gotten you this far, but it doesn't have to follow you from here on out. The good news is that humility can be learned, and it doesn't have to come through pain. It can come through choice. Choosing to recognize, even if it's late, that there is greater knowledge, an eternal intelligence, a wisdom that sees beyond. God doesn't demand perfection to give you direction. He demands willingness. And when you let your guard down, when you stop fighting against divine guidance and start walking with it, the burden lifts. Your mind clears, your heart breathes. Because finally, you are no longer trying to navigate life alone. Finally, you understand that there is a God ready to show you the best path, and more, ready to walk with you on that path. This surrender is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of spiritual maturity. It is a sign that you no longer want to walk on your own, stumbling over the same stone, making the same mistakes. It's a sign that you are ready for something new, for something higher, for the wisdom that liberates, guides, and protects. And it may seem contradictory, but it is precisely when we feel small before God that He lifts us up in a way that we could never do alone. Because true strength comes from dependence on Him. And it is this strength coming from wisdom that sustains us even when the whole world seems to be falling apart. Maybe you've never heard it this way, but now that you have, don't ignore it. God is inviting you to live something different, not out of obligation, but out of love. And true love corrects, teaches, and guides. It doesn't shout to convince you, it whispers, hoping you'll listen. Perhaps this is exactly why so many feel frustrated with God's silence, because they expect Him to speak loudly, immediately, and thunderously. But most of the time, divine wisdom is revealed in silence. And this silence does not mean absence, it means construction. God works in silence because the process He is working within us is too deep to be interrupted by noise. While we wait for a visible answer, He invisibly shapes our faith. While we complain about the delay, He strengthens what really sustains the journey: trust. Many people give up halfway because they confuse silence with abandonment. But there is a huge difference between being ignored and being trained. God never ignores a sincere heart, but sometimes He is silent so that our sensitivity may be heightened, for us to learn to listen with our hearts and not just with our ears. It's like a teacher who doesn't talk during a test, not because he left the student alone, but because he's already taught the lesson before. And now it's time to apply it. God does the same with us. There are times when everything seems dark and confusing, but not because He's left the scene. It's precisely in those moments that He observes our reaction, and it's there that we learn lessons that no theory could teach. Divine wisdom teaches us that not all silence is empty. Sometimes it is space to mature, reflect, grow, and this requires patience. The patience of those who understand that God does not work under pressure, but with purpose, that He does not act to impress us, but to transform us. The problem is that we have been conditioned to want everything yesterday, immediate results, quick solutions. But wisdom from on high moves at a different pace. It is not interested in rushing, it is committed to preparing. And this preparation takes time, sometimes more time than we would like, but always the exact time we need. While we wait, we are tempted to take shortcuts, to look for easy solutions, to accept shallow advice that pleases our immediate desires but sabotages our future. And this is where many people go wrong, because they cannot stand silence. They exchange the truth for haste. And haste is the enemy of wisdom. But what if you could look at this time of silence as an invitation to go deeper, a call to dive into areas of yourself that you've always avoided? Because the truth is that God often silences us out there to force us to listen within. He doesn't just want to change what surrounds us, He wants to change who we are. And sometimes, for that to happen, you have to go through the valley of uncertainty, the valley of doubt, the valley of discomfort, because that's where dependency is refined. It is there that spiritual maturity is born, and it is there, exactly there, that divine wisdom gains voice. You may be right there right now, feeling like nothing makes sense, that your prayers don't get through, that God has gone silent. But I need to tell you, He didn't go silent as a punishment. He went silent because He's building something in you, not just around you. God's silence may seem confusing, but it is never cruel. He is not toying with your pain. He is preparing your healing. And when that healing comes, it will not be superficial. It will be profound. It will be transformative. It will be complete. Divine wisdom teaches that there is a time for everything, and the time of waiting is not the time of abandonment. It is the time of alignment. It is when God puts things in the right place, in the right way, with the right people, including within us. While you wait, He works. While you despair, He organizes. And in due time, everything will make sense, not only because the problem will be solved, but because you will have become a different person to face it. God's wisdom does not spare us from the process, but it gives us peace during it. And this peace is evidence that even in silence, He is there, caring, shaping, sustaining. Because those who trust, even without understanding, remain. And it is this permanence that activates wisdom. Because those who do not give up in the dark are exactly those who are ready to walk in the light. Those who do not lose faith in silence are exactly those who will have the maturity to listen when God speaks again. Don't ignore the process. Don't underestimate the silence. Within it there is purpose. Within it there is direction. You are not being forgotten. You are being built. And it's all part of the plan. A plan that down the road you'll be thankful wasn't interrupted by your haste. The problem isn't always that God is silent. Sometimes the problem is that we don't know how to recognize when He is speaking. Not out of malice, but because we are so used to waiting for spectacular signs, visible and immediate answers, that we forget that God also speaks in subtle ways, sometimes even uncomfortable ones. That's exactly what happened to Lucas. Lucas was 26 years old. He grew up in a Christian home, learned about God from an early age, attended church, knew the songs and the verses. But inside, everything was shallow. He knew many truths by heart, but he couldn't apply them when crises came. And they did. The first crisis was internal, a constant confusion about who he was, what he should do, where he should go. The kind of silent crisis that no one notices from the outside, but that, inside, consumes like fire. Lucas tried to fit into the patterns he saw, to be successful, to be recognized, to appear confident. And for a while, he even succeeded. But this only increased the frustration. The feeling was one of emptiness, as if, even with everything seemingly in place, nothing really made sense. Prayer became a mechanical routine, faith a burden, and the relationship with God, well, that became distant. Not out of rebellion, but out of frustration. If He is speaking, why can't I hear? Lucas thought. Could it be that He isn't speaking to me? This doubt turned into bitterness, and the bitterness turned into withdrawal. It started small. Skipping church services, avoiding conversations about faith, ignoring invitations to pray, until everything became a great silence, not God's silence, but his silence. Lucas stopped seeking, he stopped trying. He got used to the idea of living on autopilot. It was during this phase that he discovered paths that promised to fill the void. Shallow friendships, emotional addictions, distractions that seemed harmless but that gradually disconnected him even more from himself. The brightness of his soul faded, and what remained was a semblance of normality, sustained by an interior in ruins. Then something unexpected happened. On an ordinary night, with nothing special, Lucas was surprised by a simple but persistent thought: come back. It was as if that word had been planted inside him. No noise, no spectacle, just that. Come back. He ignored it. He tried to occupy his mind, but the word was there again the next day, and the next, and the next. It was as if, even without seeking it, God was calling him, insistently but gently, firmly but lovingly. On the fourth night, he couldn't take it anymore. He lay down on the floor of his room and spoke in a low, emotionless voice, almost as if testing something for the last time. If it really is the Lord, then speak to me in a way I can understand. And it was there, in absolute vulnerability, that the answer came, not with an audible voice, not with a prophecy, but with a peace. Peace he hadn't felt in months. Peace that didn't make sense. Peace that filled him. Lucas cried like a child, not because he understood everything, but because, for the first time in a long time, he felt that he had been heard, and more, that he was also beginning to listen. That same week, Luke read a passage that had never caught his attention, the story of Samuel, a boy who also didn't know how to recognize the voice of God, who needed help to understand that it was God who was calling him. But once he learned to listen, he was never the same again. And Samuel's first response was the one Luke learned to repeat: "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." That was a turning point. It wasn't magic. It wasn't instantaneous. But from that point on, Lucas decided to cultivate a listening heart. He no longer wanted to just listen when he was desperate. He wanted to learn to live by listening. And that decision changed everything. Lucas came back little by little. He rebuilt his faith not as someone who recovers something old, but as someone who discovers something new, deeper, more true. He learned to silence the noise from outside, to hear the direction from within. He learned to discern, to wait, to trust. What seemed like silence was actually a call, and when he responded, wisdom began to manifest itself in unexpected ways, in the simplest decisions, in the words he avoided, in the attitudes he began to change. Not because someone told me to, but because now he had heard, and whoever truly listens to God never acts the same way again. Maybe like Luke, you felt like God has stopped speaking. But what if, in fact, he's just waiting for you to learn to listen? The call may not come as you expect. It may not come with lightning or thunder, but if you're quiet enough, you may already be listening. And in that moment, everything can start to change. If this message spoke to you, and if you are willing to listen to God's voice more than ever, right now in the comments, I decide to listen and trust. As a form of recognition, we on the channel will like your comment and follow your transformation process. This simple action can be the first step on a completely new journey. And keep watching, because what comes next may be exactly what you needed to hear to start over without guilt, without fear, and with the wisdom that comes from above. Don't underestimate the next minute. It could be the beginning of everything you've been praying for so long. Sometimes the biggest obstacle to hearing God's wisdom isn't doubt, it's guilt. Because when we make mistakes, and we know we've made mistakes, something inside us creates the feeling that we've lost the right to listen, to start over, to try again. And that's when many give up. Not because they lack faith in God, but because they lack faith in themselves. But God's wisdom does not exclude those who have failed. On the contrary, it calls them, it invites them, it rebuilds them. Because starting over is not a prize for those who have done well, but a gift for those who repent. Peter knew this. He wasn't just a disciple. He was the boldest, the most intense, the first to say, "Even if everyone else abandons you, I will never leave you." But just a few hours later, that's exactly what he did. He denied Jesus 3 times, and it wasn't just a mistake. It was a broken identity, a trauma, a pain he didn't know how to fix. After that, Peter walked away. He went back to fishing. He went back to the place from which he had been taken. because, for him, his mission was over. How could someone who betrayed God's trust continue to be used by him? But it was at this exact point of frustration that Jesus came to meet him, not to condemn, but to restore. And he did not do it by shouting or demanding. He did it by asking questions. With a conversation by the sea, 3 questions that healed 3 denials. Peter, do you love me? This is the wisdom of God in action. A wisdom that does not ignore error, but also does not define anyone by it. That does not pretend nothing happened, but offers real healing. And above all, that restores purpose. Peter didn't go back to being who he was before. He went back to being who God always knew he could be. Maybe you're carrying the weight of decisions that destroyed parts of your life. Maybe you're trying to forgive yourself for thoughtless choices, impulsive words, actions you never imagined you'd take. And now you're constantly trying to fix what you broke or running away from the pieces that are left behind. But God's wisdom is different from the world's logic. The world condemns and files away. God confronts and restores. The world says, you threw away your chance. God says, I make everything new. The question is, are you willing to let that new beginning begin? Many people fail to take this step because they expect a complete change before they can even approach God. They think they need to be perfect in order to start over. But this is an illusion. Starting over does not require perfection. It requires surrender. God doesn't expect you to get everything right. He expects you to recognize where you went wrong and come back with an open heart. And it's in that return, often with fear, shame, and tears, that he acts most powerfully. The wisdom that comes from above knows how to deal with broken hearts. It does not pressure. It guides. It cleanses. It teaches. And most importantly, it restores. Not only your external life, but your inner peace, because there is no true new beginning if the soul is still stuck in the past. Peter, after the restoration, did not become just an ordinary disciple. He became a leader, a reference. And this was not in spite of his failure, but precisely because he went through it. Because he understood what grace is. He understood what mercy is. And this deep understanding made him stronger. God does not waste pain. He transforms every wound into testimony, every mistake into learning, every tear into a source of wisdom. But for this to happen, you need to allow him to remake you. And allowing begins with a step, a return, a sincere surrender, without reservations, without masks. You don't have to know all the details of what's coming next. You just have to say, I'm here, I want to come back. And God, in his infinite wisdom, will know exactly how to guide that process. He's done it before, he continues to do it, and he wants to do it with you, because what he started, he is faithful to finish. Even if there have been setbacks along the way, even if you have strayed, the work is not lost. It is just being redirected. Some cycles in life are not broken with effort, they are broken with wisdom. Because there are patterns that repeat themselves, not for lack of desire to change, but for lack of understanding of what is behind them. Relapses, toxic relationships, decisions that always end up in the same place. It's as if you were going around the same mountain once, twice, 10 times, and you ask yourself, why does this keep happening to me? The truth is that external change begins with internal clarity, and this clarity does not come from impulse, emotion, or haste. It comes from the wisdom that makes us see what was previously invisible. It makes us realize what is behind repetitions, what sustains addictions, what fuels falls. There are those who struggle with symptoms for years without ever addressing the root cause. Because without wisdom, we treat effects and ignore causes. We want to fix the behavior, but we don't understand what leads to it. We want to break away from what holds us back, but we don't recognize the invisible bonds we've built over time. God's wisdom does this. It illuminates. It brings out of the shadows. It reveals what is hidden. And as uncomfortable as this process may be, it is necessary because no one can free themselves from what they continue to ignore. Paul wrote about this with stunning honesty. He said, "I do not understand what I am doing. For what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do." This is a picture of someone at war with himself, someone who has a conscience but lacks direction, someone who wants to get it right but doesn't know how to break out of the cycle. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever felt frustrated by repeating mistakes you swore you would never make again? Have you ever promised yourself you would change, only to fall back into the same old rut? This does not mean you are weak in character. It means that perhaps you are trying to break through the strength of the flesh, which can only be overcome with spiritual guidance. The wisdom that comes from above doesn't just point out mistakes, it teaches the way out. But to hear it, you have to stop fooling yourself. Stop rationalizing destructive behaviors. Stop justifying attitudes that sabotage your journey. As long as you keep covering up deep wounds, they will never heal. And it's not about perfection, it's about alignment. God isn't looking for flawless people. He's looking for hearts willing to break out of patterns that no longer fit the purpose. And breaking out isn't just saying, "I want to change." It's saying, "I'm willing to let God show me what needs to be transformed, even if it hurts." Sometimes these cycles are tied to voices from the past, words that were thrown at you, traumas that shaped your identity, distorted ideas that you absorbed and turned into truths. And without realizing it, these lies became the foundation for bad decisions, destructive relationships, and behaviors that lead you away from God. Divine wisdom is like a light burning in an old room. Suddenly, everything becomes visible, the dust, the cracks, the marks of time. But along with this light also comes the possibility of cleansing, restoration, reconstruction. God does not reveal in order to expose, He reveals to heal. And in this process, the Holy Spirit does not just act with pretty words. He confronts, He disturbs, He touches areas that we would rather keep hidden. But this touch is liberating. Because where God's wisdom enters, lies lose strength. Where truth establishes itself, the cycle begins to be broken. And here's something important. Breaking a cycle doesn't always mean immediate change. Sometimes it means starting to make different decisions, even if the old impulse is still there. It means listening to a new voice, wiser, firmer, even when the old one still whispers. It's a process, one step at a time. But with wisdom, each step is definitive, and over time, something changes. What once dominated you no longer has as much power. What attracted you no longer has the same shine, because wisdom transforms the root, not just the surface. It changes your mindset, not just your routine. And when the mind changes, everything around starts to align. So stop judging yourself for still struggling and start rejoicing that you are discerning. The first sign of liberation is discomfort. It's when you can no longer live on autopilot. You no longer accept repeating yesterday's pain as if it were normal. You no longer want to just survive the cycles. You want to break out of them. And God is willing to help you, but not with magic solutions, with wisdom, with clarity, with direction. He will show you what needs to be let go of, who you need to stop hanging out with, what you need to change. And if you listen and obey, the cycle will break. Breaking cycles is the beginning, but walking a new path requires something even more challenging: trust. And trusting God doesn't always mean understanding. Often it means following even when nothing makes sense. It means moving without seeing. It means staying even when everything inside you tells you to give up. The wisdom that comes from above is not just comfort, it is guidance. It exists not only for the past we want to heal, but for the future we cannot yet see. And the future is exactly where fear sets in, because it is uncertain, unknown, uncontrollable. But it is also where faith becomes real. There is a wisdom that is not revealed before the journey. It manifests itself during the journey. It is like a lamp that illuminates the next steps, not the entire route. Because God does not give maps, He offers presence. And His presence, although invisible to the eyes, is more real than any evidence. Jesus spoke about this in one of the most well-known but least practiced messages. Do not be anxious about tomorrow. It is almost impossible to hear this phrase without thinking about everything that worries us. Bills, children, decisions, professional future, relationships. Anxiety is the natural reaction of those who want to control what has not yet arrived. But wisdom is the choice to trust in the one who is already there. Anxiety feeds on doubt. Wisdom is strengthened by faith. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to remain, even when fear is present. It is looking at an uncertain scenario and declaring, I don't know how, but I know in whom I trust. And this trust is not blind. It is based on God's faithfulness. Maybe you are right there, between what is already behind you and what has not yet begun, between what you have lost and what you have not yet achieved. And this space, this gap, is a dangerous place. It is where many give up, where many turn back, where many get distracted. But it is also the place where the wisest remain. Because the silence that taught you to listen, the restoration that taught you to start over, the discernment that taught you to break patterns, all of this now prepares you for the next phase, walking by faith. And faith is not irresponsibility. It is supernatural wisdom. It is knowing that you don't need to understand everything to be on the right path. It is recognizing that God's care is not only in the destination, but in every detail of the journey. It's not easy to trust the unseen, but the truth is, you already do it all the time. When you get into a car, you trust that the driver knows the way. When you take medicine, you trust that it will work. When you deposit money, you trust that it will be safe. So why is it so hard to trust God, who has never failed you? The problem is that we have been taught to believe in what is measurable, but God works in the unseen. He acts in the invisible. He prepares in the invisible. And if you don't learn to trust in what you can't see, you will live trapped in what has already happened, without ever accessing what God still wants to give you. This is where wisdom comes in as an anchor. Not the anchor that holds you in place, but the one that keeps you from being blown away by the wind. Because life is full of storms. Circumstances change, people leave, doors close. But wisdom keeps you steady. It reminds you of who you are, and most importantly, who God is. You may be waiting for a big reveal to tell you what to do. But sometimes wisdom comes in the form of a simple conviction. Keep going, even without answers, even with fear, even with tears. Continue, because there is a purpose in every step, and the purpose doesn't need to be explained now. You just need to be obeyed. This confidence transforms the way you live, because instead of reacting to circumstances, you begin to respond to the Spirit. Instead of chasing after human security, you anchor yourself in the promise, and instead of doubting what you don't yet see, you declare in faith, God is here, and that is enough. Wisdom from above does not eliminate questions, but it offers peace in the midst of them. And this peace is more precious than any certainty, because certainties change. But the peace that comes from God remains, even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. If today you are experiencing a moment of waiting, insecurity, or confusion, don't see it as a punishment. See it as training, as preparation. Because God does not waste uncertainties, He uses them to make us more sensitive to His voice, more dependent on His care, more mature for what is to come. Throughout this journey, you have seen that God's wisdom is not an abstract concept. It is alive, real, present. Together we have discovered that true wisdom begins when we recognize that we do not know everything, that we cannot do everything, that we do not control everything. We have seen that God's silence is not always absence. Often it is preparation, and that it is in this silence that He works, molds, and matures. We talked about pride and how it distances us from God's voice, making us trust only in our own understanding. We reflected on the character Luke and his story, so similar to that of many, and saw how even those who get lost can hear the Father's voice again and rebuild their journey. We discovered that mistakes do not define the end of a story, because wisdom from above restores, heals, and restores purpose. We talk about cycles that repeat themselves, about emotional addictions, relapses, and invisible prisons. And we learn that breaking away from this requires more than effort. It requires light. It requires discernment. It requires a decision to walk with God, even when it is difficult. And finally, we recognize that living by divine wisdom means choosing to trust, even without understanding. It means walking by faith, not by sight. It means resting in the certainty that God guides those who are willing to follow. And now, your moment has come. You have come this far because something inside you is awakening. Maybe for the first time, maybe after a long time. But one thing is certain, whoever hears this kind of word will not return to their routine the same way. Because God's wisdom does not just inform, it transforms. And if it has touched you today, it is time to act. If you are truly committed to living guided by divine wisdom, prove it right now. Leave in the comments, "I choose to live by the wisdom of God." We at the channel will leave a like on your comment as recognition for your commitment. And yes, we will closely follow your journey. Because whoever declares this publicly already positions themselves as someone who is on a higher level, someone who decides to grow, listen, and transform. Oh, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now. This isn't just about a click, it's about being part of a movement of people who are awakening spiritually, who no longer want to survive, but to live with clarity, purpose, and truth. Turn on the bell so you don't miss any words like this, because each video here could be an answer from God for you. And tell me, what was the code that turned the key inside you? Comment below. We want to know which part spoke to your heart the most. Your experience can bless others. Your story can resonate in the life of someone who needs exactly what you touched. And if this video reached you, share with as many people as possible. Be generous with what you have received. Just as you have been blessed with this content, bless other lives. Now, before you leave, pay close attention. The 2 videos that will appear on your screen now are a direct continuation of this journey. Each of them has crucial content for your next step. Don't ignore it. Don't think I'll see later. Watch now. Because there could be the answer to the prayer you didn't even have the strength to say. You are not here by chance. You are already different. And applying what you received today puts you in a select group of people who are ready to impact the world with their transformation. So what are you going to do now? Are you going to let this go? Or are you going to act like you understand that God has spoken and are ready to obey? Comment, share, sign up, and continue, because the sky is just beginning to open up over your life.